I am so glad you convinced me that the family car should be the Defender 110. It is so beautiful inside, it's so comfortable, and it just feels indestructible.
Yes, it really is. I've been waiting a long time for the new model to come out. The Defender 110, I'm telling you, it's my favorite car of all times. It's my third one. You know, I have stories of going off road. The guy managed the group. He was like, "What are you doing in this beautiful car?" I'm like, "I'm going off road." He's like, "Are you sure? Because you can use one of ours." And then they look like Mad Max cars. I'm like, no, we're going to do this. And he was shocked.
Wow. Well, it's great because the Defender has been reimagined for 21st century adventure, and its unparalleled off-road ability as well as its robust interior are invaluable whether you're headed towards uncharted territory or just a weekend of exploration. The Defender 110 tackles challenging surroundings with absolute confidence. The SUV conveys strength outside and in, featuring peerless technology like an intuitive driver display and an award-winning infotainment system. That's my favorite part, to keep you connected no matter where the journey takes you. Adventure is unique to everyone, and so is the Defender. Choose from the two-door Defender 90, the four-door Defender 110, or the larger Defender 130 with the ability to seat up to 8 passengers. You'll find uncompromising performance in all three. So pack up and go even further with the Defender 110. Learn more at LandRoverUSA.com/Defender.
The McNugget Buddies are back. But this time, they got a fresh look as part of the new Kerwin Frost box at McDonald's. We're talking all new Buddies, dressed head to toe in the freshest fits, all designed by the artist Kerwin Frost. So when you order the Kerwin Frost box with your choice of 10-piece McNuggets or a Big Mac, you'll get one of the flyest McNugget Buddies to go with it. Think you can collect them all? Ba-da-ba-ba-ba. I'm loving it.
At participating McDonald's for a limited time while supplies last.
So what happened to Ian when he went to jail? He was a 21-year-old kid, basically, going to jail. What happened to him in jail? And then the amazing ways in which he transformed his life afterwards. So here's Ian again.
This isn't your average business podcast, and he's not your average host. This is the James Altucher Show.
What did the judge sentence you to?
So he ends up sentencing me to 3 years in prison, 1 year home confinement, and 3 years of supervised release, which is like probation in the feds.
And did you think, how long did you actually think you would serve?
I didn't know. I mean, you hear mixed things, especially as a kid and stuff. I thought maybe 50%. I didn't know, but then there was programming. See, like the thing about prison and everything, you ask one guy the same question. You ask 10 different guys like the same question, you're going to get 10 different answers. No one really knows. Every person's scenario is different. Even the idea of COVID changed everything. Now so many people can get house arrest, this and that. But in my scenario, I ended up doing 26 months inside, 3 months of halfway house / home confinement, and then a year on an ankle monitor on home confinement under probation.
And were you in a low security place, or?
They put me through diesel therapy. I was everywhere. I went from the Wyatt Detention Center in Rhode Island. I went to Brooklyn. I went to Fort Dix, a low security prison. From there, I went to the Danbury, Connecticut low security prison, which is where I was from. I was in Philly Detention Center for a little bit. I was in Brooklyn again during transportation. They sent me all the way out to Chicago for a little bit. I was in Chicago. I was in Oklahoma City. I went on.
Why'd they send you so many places?
So the first time I got caught up in a cell phone investigation, which I was found not guilty of, and then they just moved prisons. But the second time when I got to Danbury, which was my hometown, which was going to be great. I was right next to my parents, and one of the guards ends up reporting that I used to date his cousin. So it was a conflict of interest. So they locked me in the shoe, solitary, I was there for almost 6 months. And then I had my parents calling every day. They get a state senator to call, they get a lawyer to call, and that pissed the BOP off, the Bureau of Prisons. So they send me on Con Air, the airplane ran by the U.S. Marshals. That's when they transported me through the system where you go. It took me 2 weeks to get to Wisconsin from Connecticut. you go to Oklahoma City, you go to Chicago, and then eventually I landed in Wisconsin, which the camp was great. Oxford, Wisconsin prison camp. This thing was cushy. You know who I was there with? George Papadopoulos from Donald Trump's initial team. He was there for 2 weeks. But there's cell phones getting in. People are running through the woods to like hook up with their wives. People are smuggling in, McDonald's, sushi, pizza. I remember eating Chicago deep dish pizza one weekend. We're watching movies. It's crazy. There's a track. This is what they mean by club fed. But it was crazy. And then I got out in January 2019.
And what was the most violent prison you're in? Like, were you ever, was there a point where you were scared?
I would say Fort Dix would have been the most violent. Guys were definitely like trying me, I guess you could call it, because I looked like a sex offender in their eyes. Because in these federal prisons, there's not that many young white kids in there really at all for fraud. That's more like the average like fraud guy is in his 30s or 40s in these prisons. And I'm 21 years old, which is hard to believe. It's 7 years ago now. But yeah.
And when you say they were trying you, what does that mean?
So they would like, try to extort me, try to get me to buy them commissary, buy them a cell phone, things like that. So it's really about just like navigating and learning how to survive and get through the system.
How do you survive that?
So I just played it smart. I found this clip actually went viral when I told it on TikTok. I started befriending some of these big guys in there, and they didn't really have much money. So I started buying them commissary every week and playing cards with them and hanging around them. And because of that, other guys weren't going to bother me because they didn't want to, like, say, interfere with those guys' hustle. Because the other inmates are looking at it as those guys are hustling me. But really, I'm just paying them commissary as a friend, as whatever, an acquaintance. And that's how it was structured. And everyone left me alone at that point. And then there's the process of like showing paperwork to show that you're not a sex offender, you're not a rat or anything like that. And then guys left me alone. And they gave me the nickname McLovin in prison.
Yeah, you do look a little like McLovin.
Yeah, McLovin, Squints, and Bieber. They called me Bieber for like Justin Bieber.
And so you're in prison not with like violent offenders, but with other fraud offenders?
No, in the lows, you're with violent people. You're guys that have committed murder, sex offenders, some of the worst sex offenders, anything, robberies. At the camp, there's no violent people.
So, I mean, did you know what everybody was convicted of? Like if someone was a murderer or a sex offender or whatever?
You could find out if you wanted to through the grapevine, or you look it up on a cell phone. If someone had a contraband phone or anything like that, you could find things out.
Was it better to just not talk to anybody?
Yeah, I mean, if I had a recommendation for someone to go to prison, but I was in everyone's business, moving around too much. I was a kid, I was just screwing around. I was gambling. I was doing whatever. I was trying to hustle, make money. I was getting myself into trouble, which I didn't need to be doing, but that's just like the type of person I am, It's like, that expression where they say like, or like the people that go and smell the shit or whatever to see what it smells like. That was me.
And why would you do that knowing that could get you into maybe stay in jail longer?
I think I was just curious and I missed the adrenaline. Like I went from having so much freedom running this club, always getting into trouble and sticking up to authority, to prison. So you kind of have to, I was getting like that fix, that high, that adrenaline.
And you on your YouTube channel, you interview various other inmates and stuff. What were some of the most, like, what are the stories that intrigued you that you found in prison?
Like the stories that I hear about now?
Yeah.
I think what intrigues me the most is like the times where guys kind of like get bullied. Like I had a guy on and he was literally talking about how he got raped in the prison shower, and just like hearing how like the system fails in that aspect, and why they're taking people that are nonviolent and putting them with violent people, and the politics about that and the gangs and things like that. Like I'm interested in the psychological aspect of it and what people are thinking and how they're navigating and how they're moving around, and just like where the system fails on that level.
And did you see any of that in the prisons you were in?
No, I didn't physically see it, but I'd hear stories. Like I heard stories about, it was always really the sex offenders that would get beat up or someone that like didn't pay a debt. But there was stories about like a sex offender got a mop handle like shoved up his ass in the hallway, and things like that you would hear about. And then you would see fights, the occasional fight, but like not to the extent of the stories that I hear on my podcast, because I was only at that low security prison for like 6 or 7 months. But yeah, crazy things happen.
And in the solitary confinement, what does that actually mean? Does that mean you can't go outside and you're in a room with no windows and they give you food once a day? Or what does the solitary confinement mean?
So you're locked down, 23 hours a day, 24 hours technically on the weekends. But during the week, you get an hour of rec time, which they handcuff you and bring you to a cage outside, a little cage. So you're moving from one cell to another cell, which is in a cage by yourself. You get a shower 3 times a week, no commissary. You're getting 3 meals a day, no seconds or anything. So you get very skinny when you're in the shoe. They're not big portions. You can get a book. I was reading like a book a day at one point because that's all you could do all day. You wake up, unless you're doing push-ups or whatever, you're reading all day and you're just stuck there laying on your bed. You're talking to other inmates for the cell next door. At the Danbury prison, because I wasn't there like in solitary, the shoe, because I was in trouble, they let me become the orderly. So I was painting cells. It looked like Alcatraz with the old bars, and they had me paint the cells white. So that got me out of the cell. But the shoe's terrible. It sucks. It's mentally draining. It's just not a good place to be in.
And then, so then you get out and you go to a halfway house or whatever. Like, what was your?
I go to a halfway house in Waterbury, Connecticut, which is like the hood of Connecticut. Not fun. The halfway house is just like you would meet guys. It's so bad that guys are like, I don't want, because there's so many rules that they stack up, more rules than in prison. And this is supposed to be halfway to freedom, like reintegrating. There's 9 million rules. So guys would want to say, take me back. I'm not following this shit. Take me back to prison. Just so strict, very petty, very silly. And you have staff that, either just graduated college or they're still in college. They don't care about the job. It's a bullshit pay job. Not even $20 an hour, probably. It's just an intermediate step for them. And there's kids younger than me, and I'm young at that time by the time I got out, but there's people younger than me. These halfway houses are very flawed and they're very for profit. So it's not a good situation.
These days, we're all investors, trying to be smart with our money despite our worst impulses. But at iShares, we believe that deep down inside of every investor is a better investor. One that's just waiting to be let out. Explore iShares ETFs and insights and let your best investor out. Visit iShares.com for more information.
The McNugget Buddies are back. But this time, they got a fresh look as part of the new Kerwin Frost box at McDonald's. We're talking all new buddies, dressed head to toe in the freshest fits, all designed by the artist Kerwin Frost. So when you order the Kerwin Frost box with your choice of 10-piece McNuggets or a Big Mac, you'll get one of the flyest McNugget buddies to go with it. Think you can collect them all? Ba-da-ba-ba-ba. I'm loving it.
At participating McDonald's for a limited time while supplies last.
At what point do you feel like prison changed you? Like, did you start feeling like, oh no, I'm a convicted felon now for the rest of my life. I'm not going to have a career. I'm not going to succeed. Like, did you ever lose hope that life would continue?
No, I was never depressed about it. I think that, I remember seeing and hearing on social media when I went to prison or even found guilty, people are like, wow, he's a felony. His life's over. Like, he's got that on him for the rest of his life. And like, I know my lawyer even played that up at sentencing to try to get me house arrest, saying like, this is extreme. He has a felony. this affects him for the rest of his life. And I got to say, and I'm grateful for this, but it really hasn't affected me like it would to the average person. Maybe that's just my mindset, or maybe that's fate, or whatever it is. I think that what affected me the most was when I got arrested up until after I got out of prison, because that's when the media was slamming me hard. I remember trying to get a job before prison after being convicted, and not even Olive Garden would hire me as a dishwasher because of the bad press. But also I owned the club at that point too, so I was kind of doing my own thing. But when I got out, I was very lucky that I went to Whole Foods and they hired me, and I was able to go from making $15 an hour as a hot bar cook to 3 years later, by the time I quit, I was on track to make $100,000 last year with overtime. I was the manager of prepared foods, $32 an hour, great job. And that was just based my dedication, hard work. I was able, in those 3 years, I got an apartment. I got my own apartment. I got a dog. I got a car. My credit was never affected throughout this whole thing because I never used credit. So I was able to build my credit up, got a car, did all these things, credit cards, things that I never had in my life before. My life was significantly better after prison, because before I was just running a nightclub with no money. And now I fell in love with the idea of working for someone else and having my own money and being able to make $4 or $5 grand a month, because I hadn't made that since high school. So it was great. Like, I was loving the grind. I got a second job making pizzas. Never affected me at all.
And did you ever feel like, oh, I need to start a business again or get back into the club business? And
when I first got out, I wanted to get into the club business so bad. I thought that was my redemption. That was the only way I could ever, I figured that was what I was plotting. That's what kept me going in prison. I have all these notes still about what I was writing, just like the plan for the club, what I would name it, all of these things. This was my comeback story. Simultaneously, while writing a book and selling a book deal and getting a movie made, I studied Wolf of Wall Street. This is my ticket to success. And I slowly realized I had no money to do that, and I was not going to take investors to do it. So that fizzled out, and it's a good thing it fizzled out, because COVID happened, a year later. So even if I managed to get the nightclub going, it would have been dead. And then I got the job. I finally caved in and got the job at Whole Foods, because I'm I'm pitching my story actively, emailing writers. I get some buzz, BBC reached out to me, nothing. It was one lead after another, and I'm emailing agents, and it was no after no. I remember I made an Excel spreadsheet, and I had emailed 150 literary agents the first 3 chapters of the story of my book and a synopsis and the news. Out of 150, 6 emailed me back. 3 of those ended up not being interested. The other 3 said, after requesting the first chapter, said they're not interested because there's no relevant media or news. The last article written about me was from 4 years prior by Vice, and it was dead. It was a dead story. So I gave it up. I focused on Whole Foods, and I remember the last piece to getting my whole life together was having a car in my own name. At that point, I was paying for my own insurance. I was totally self-sufficient. And the day I got the car, this was almost a year after I got out, I get an inbox message on Facebook that went to my spam from an intern at HBO Max. And she pitches the whole thing. Hey, can we get on a call? And something told me to message her back. I messaged her back. She called me. They said, we're doing a docu-series. We want to hear your story. I tell them the whole story on the phone for 3 hours. Didn't hear anything back for 6 months. Nothing. I'm okay, whatever. At that point, I'm focused on the job. And then 2 weeks before COVID hit, I get an email saying, hey, this is green lit. This is what's happening. You're a part of the series. COVID hits, it gets delayed, but they ended up filming it during COVID, and it comes out a year later. And I'm thinking still at that point, this is my big ticket. This is going to blow everything up. This is going to get me to where I need to be at. The episode comes out. HBO Max didn't really promote it that much because HBO Max was new at the time. And I was just one episode of 10 other people's stories. And I got landed on a big podcast, a Mind Pump podcast, which was great. And I got that attention, but my social media didn't blow up. Nothing happened crazily. But the story was out there, and then Vice ends up doing a documentary on me, and that did 3 million views on YouTube, but nothing major is happening. So I was like, okay, maybe this is not my life. This is not my fate. This is not my journey. I'm just going to stay focused on Whole Foods, work my way up, be a store manager. Life goes on. And then a year after that, a year after Vice, a year after HBO, it was last July, I start getting these thoughts of, is this really what the rest of my life is going to be like? Like, I went from owning a nightclub, doing all these things, making real money in high school. Like, I'm 28, 27 years old at this point. Is there more out there for me? Can I have the opportunity to build something again? Because I don't have a family right now. I don't have kids. Like, yes, I'm in debt, from the past, but is now the time to take a risk? And my friend had been pushing me for months, the videographer from the nightclub days. His name's Mike Squires. And he said, dude, you got to get on TikTok. The way you're able to go viral on TikTok is crazy. It's unlike any other platform. You got to start telling your story. And I was very hesitant, but I start telling my story on Instagram one day a week or once a day, doing these selfie videos behind the HBO Max poster. And I'm just doing a story, mapping it out. And then I start doing it on TikTok. I'm like 4 or 5 videos in, I'm getting like 1,000 views each day. This is last July. And on the 6th video, I get COVID. And I call my friend and I'm like, dude, I can't post a video. I'm in bed. I'm sick. I'm not doing it. Because he said, you have to be consistent if you're going to start this. And he's like, dude, you got to do it. And I'm all snuffly, nose, whatever. And I make the video. And it was about my time being in solitary. The video goes viral. 1.5, 1.6 million views in a matter of days. Blows my TikTok up. Like, I'm getting more followers, this and that. Like, it's getting traction. Not making any money, but it's getting traction. After that video, a producer from MTV reaches out to me and was like, hey, we love your story. We'd love to cast you on this new dating series we're doing. So I'm like, okay, this is it. Like, I'm a big believer in like fate and everything happens for a reason. Like, this is what my life has came to. This is my opportunity. And there was like a whole interview process and stuff, but I didn't hesitate. I went in the day after I heard from that producer. I put my 2 weeks in at my job.
Wow.
No money lined up, nothing, no deal made. It was because they were already saying, listen, if you get casted in this, you're going to have to be out of the country for 2 months. I had just gotten my passport back from the government too, after 8
But in a
years.
reality series, do they pay you in a reality series?
So I would have been paid for that. Not much, but the exposure I was looking at, to go overseas, they would have had my expenses. I wasn't going to be able to work. And they end up ghosting me. Never hear from them again. And in hindsight, had I taken that opportunity, if I got it, I wouldn't be where I'm at today because I needed to be dedicated to my social media, which is what I did. Kept my head down, focused on social media, lived off my credit cards for a few months, and just started grinding. 3 to 5 clips a day on TikTok, on Facebook, on YouTube, on Instagram, just telling my stories from prison. And it starts blowing up, hundreds of thousands of views. By January, I'm at 100,000 followers on TikTok. YouTube was at 3,000, all these different things. And I didn't realize there was this huge community of prison TikTokers. And it's 1 billion people watching this in the world. And in about late December, I start thinking, for the first time ever, I'm thinking about the pitfalls and I'm thinking about long term. And I'm like, this is not sustainable forever. I cannot talk about my story forever. And I'm not making any real money at this point, maybe a couple grand a month on social media, nothing major. And so I get the idea to start a podcast. And up until this point, I was very anti-podcast because I felt the market was flooded, and there were already prison podcasts out there. So what would make mine different? Come up with this idea for the podcast. I call it Locked In with Ian Bick, kind of the play on prison. And the first 2 episodes, they were very cringe, like looking back on it, like the first 1, 2, or 3 episodes. I didn't have a direction. There was no purpose. It was just Ian Bick was interviewing people. And I remember researching these guests and having like 50 questions. And I literally read the conversation didn't flow. It was just question after question after question. And we start like pushing the videos out, chopping it into clips. And I make all my own clips, do all the editing for the clip aspect, and no real direction. And then I start thinking and, people start leaving comments, and I'm garnering feedback, and that's when everything like clicks, like in my brain, in the universe, in my mind. This can be an inspirational podcast where you're taking people's stories, their life trauma about going through the worst of the worst, the American justice system, and telling it in a documentary style way, going through their childhood, something that other podcasts in that genre are not doing, because your average prison YouTube channel starts off with, what did you get arrested for, this and that. We're spending the first half hour learning about someone's childhood. I'm studying, asking the questions that no one else is asking, and it's true crime or whatever meets motivation. And the object, it very quickly came to me, is if the average person that's at home that just went through a divorce, just got broken up with, can't get a job, struggling to lose weight, listens to someone that is borderline dying from an overdose or addiction or goes to prison, loses everything, and is able to turn that around and become successful, that's going to inspire that person that's going through whatever it is they're going through. And when I kept pushing that message and really honed in on it and made it all about that message, that's when things started to go viral. We started getting a couple hundred downloads. And then within 4 months, we're doing 10,000 downloads per audio episode, which is unusual for a brand new podcast. And the thing that really stuck out was the YouTube channel. The YouTube channel, when I posted the full-length podcast for the first time on video, had 3,000 subscribers just off of shorts that I built it. This was January. We're now in August, and it has 135,000 subscribers, 100 million plays on the videos, and now our videos are doing 20 to 30,000 overnight. And it's all just pushing that message. And I think the thing that I love about it is that the first 30 minutes of it is just conversation about childhood, about whatever. It's getting to know that person. It's not based on something salacious. Like you see some of these podcasts about sex, this and that, which sells and gets all these downloads, which is great. But that's in the first couple minutes to get the person hooked. We're doing this because we have a very dedicated following. And it's a group, like I talk to agents and stuff all the time. They're like, you have attracted a group of male, because it's 90% male, ages 28 to 34, that don't normally listen to podcasts, but they relate to me in the way I'm telling the story and comparing my story. And I'm one of the few podcasters that have actually been to prison that are interviewing other prison inmates. And they're relating to these stories because these stories have never been told before in this manner. So it's just a very unique experience. And I finally, long story short, I found my purpose and my direction, and that's what's working. And I dropped everything else. I started producing like this commissary cooking show about prison cooking, which, was getting some views, but I'm like, this is not what I need to be doing. I need to focus on one thing that I'm good at, and I need to make myself better. So every day I'm reading new books. I've been following Jay Shetty, listening to his conversations. How do I get better as a podcaster? How do I get better as an editor? I've moved from cutting all the clips. I make 60 to 80 shorts a week from my episodes, because we're doing 2 episodes a week we're putting out there. So now I'm learning Premiere Pro. I'm doing whatever it takes to bring it to the next level, because this is my life, and it's only going to keep going and going and going. And I'm idolizing people like Call Her Daddy, who edits her own clips, and watching her growth and seeing people in the business, because I'm very new to it. I'm only a few months in, but I'm just like this up and comer that's really no one's really heard about and has paid attention to. And I like that it's not built on my past. Like HBO didn't give me this platform. Vice didn't give me the platform. No one gave it to me. I was able to build it through telling my stories on my own and got here.
You know what I love about fantasy sports is that even though I'm not going to be a great basketball player or a baseball player or a football player or whatever, I feel like I get to participate and make decisions and use my knowledge of these different leagues or these different sports to compete. So it's like I can pick my team or I can pick my favorite players, and I could use my knowledge to make predictions and maybe even make money. So with the basketball season here, you can now pick combo projections across football and basketball from the Specials League on Prize Picks. This is a league created specifically for combo projections that include two or more players from different sports or leagues. Want to play alongside some of Prize Picks' favorite players like rapper Meek Mill and comedian Andrew Schultz, who's also been a guest on this podcast, and I've been a guest on his? You can now find community plays under the promos tab of the app to view entries for some of the biggest names in the Prize Picks community each week. Look, Prize Picks even offers a reboot policy so that your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. For football and basketball games, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, that player is rebooted. Prize Picks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. What? So I love playing it. I love anywhere where I can use analytical ability with my interests to demonstrate some skill and maybe make some money. And I like the game-like aspect. I do wish they had chess as a category on prizepicks.com, but I'll settle for what they've got. Maybe I should make my own fantasy chess league. But in any case, I love Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/James. Use code James for a first deposit match up to $100. That's the easiest $100 you're ever going to make. So that's prizepicks.com/James and use code James. Daily fantasy sports made easy.
The McNugget Buddies are back. But this time, they got a fresh look as part of the new Kerwin Frost box at McDonald's. We're talking all new buddies, dressed head to toe in the freshest fits, all designed by the artist Kerwin Frost. So when you order the Kerwin Frost box with your choice of 10-piece McNuggets or a Big Mac, you'll get one of the flyest McNugget Buddies to go with it. Think you can collect them all? Ba-da-ba-ba-ba. I'm loving it.
At participating McDonald's for a limited time while supplies last.
If people just search on Ian Bick on YouTube, they're going to find your show.
Yep.
That's how I saw you, was seeing your video podcast. It's pretty intense. You've got a great show. And again, you have all these like ex-inmates telling these incredible stories. So it's really like how a police officer is treated in prison. Another one is Kingpin reveals his multi-million-dollar crime ring and surviving prison. Another one, mortgage fraud leads to FBI raid in the shower. Like some great stories. Like what's the economics of it now? Are you making a living from the YouTube videos?
Yeah. So, I mean, I have monetized on every platform: Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok. All of these sites pay, and which put me in a unique position as a podcaster, because if, say, you were to Google, how to make money in podcasting, the Google results are going to say, don't quit your day job, and it takes years to monetize. And that's based on the old logic of ads, where, you need X amount of downloads, which are very hard to get to start getting ads on your podcast. And I've been able to generate, $20,000 or $30,000 a month in revenue without a single ad. We started doing our first ad reads this past month, working with an ad company, because our audio downloads weren't there, but the clips are going viral. And there's so many ways to make money on the short form clips, which now push people to go to the podcast. And I'm getting into public speaking and just doing all these different things. And we just had a call with an agency about doing live shows, bringing my show live, which I think will be great because it has like the comedy feel to it. It has my personality feel. There's just so many components to it. And I think a big thing too is, there's a lot of prison content creators out there, but I'm unique in the sense where, say you're an adult scrolling through and I'm relatable, because when they stop at me, they're like, there's no way this like white nerdy kid with glasses went to prison. That gets them to stop, and they end up falling in love with the idea that I could have been their son or their grandson or their brother. And I'm super relatable, and they like that. And I get the message out there in a good way, and it's all positive. Like, yeah, you have to have the clickbait, like about the titles and thumbnails, because that's how YouTube works. But at the heart of it, when you look at it, it's not your normal prison show. This is a real like men's mental health type podcast. That's the first of its kind. That's really just, it's getting out there. And, we're going into other fields. We don't just interview inmates. We interview victims of crime, people that have went to prison. I've had family members. We've interviewed police officers, correctional officers. We're going to get into people that have just struggled with addiction, things of that nature.
Wow, it sounds great. And Ian, it sounds like potentially you could do this for the rest of your life. You're creating your own little industry here.
I think so. I mean, the direction it's going in, and now it's just about staying really focused and just being careful with like who I associate and getting out there and just like remaining humble. Because you know how it is in today's world, like anything could happen. Like if I say one wrong thing or make one wrong move, like people are watching. So I just have to be very conscious of that and just stay focused on that. But I know like in my heart that I need to just focus on this, because for the first time in I would say 10 years or so, I have something that's working. And I don't want to take that for granted.
And if looking back on your story, like all the past 10 years, is there anything you would say at this point you regret, you would wish you had done very differently?
I wouldn't say regret. I don't live like my life with regret. I would say I always think about like the things that I could have done differently, and I feel bad about like decisions I made. But also at the end of the day, I do realize that I was a kid that was never going to understand those things at the times I made that. I think it would be different if I made those same mistakes now. But I now also have this amazing life experience. And what I find interesting out of this whole thing is that, and I think it's just a message to other people, that the thing that was supposed to destroy me, ruin me, which is prison, that dread thing that no one really talks about or wants to talk about, which is why you don't see like celebrities talking about their prison experience when they go to prison, because it has a negative connotation to it. That's the thing that gave me a career. Like if I think about if I got probation, I wouldn't be where I'm at now. There wouldn't be anything. So it's interesting to think in that perspective. Like everything happened exactly the way it was supposed to, exactly for a reason, and it led me to right here.
Do you ever, you're in the same town as where you were conducting all your businesses. Did you ever run into some of the people who lent you money or invested or whatever?
Occasionally. I think a lot of people either moved out or, they don't really say anything to me. I'll run into some people maybe. What I've found is that it's the people that are either owed, not much of anything. Like a couple kids from high school that might have been owed like $1,000 or whatever, or the people that aren't owed anything at all, that just followed the case, that hate on me the most. Not the people that were out the most amount of money.
Like when you say hate on you, what do they do?
I would say like post negative things. People still post negative things on like Facebook.
That's never going to end, by the way. I'll just tell you.
It's just interesting to see what people say. I'm not affected by it. I mean, I get hundreds, thousands of comments a day between all my channels, and a lot of it's hate. That doesn't affect me anymore. But people are like, because my videos go viral a lot and the algorithm tends to push it out to like your hometown from what I've seen. So I'm sure it makes people mad, and they're like, well, they say the words like he's using his prison experience to, get famous or this and that. But I also know they're not taking the time to go and look at it, because it's not about me anymore. Maybe it was about me in the beginning when I first started on TikTok telling my stories, but there hasn't been a recent video of me doing a selfie video talking about my prison experience for months. The message is so much bigger. The brand is so much bigger. It's a real, thing. And I'm focusing on other people's stories. I'm taking stories that no one's ever heard of. And what I found doing this is that it's the people who have never told their stories before that are coming on for the first time that are the videos do the best. The views get the best. I mean, you look at every big podcast in the world, when a celebrity goes on, that celebrity's doing 10 different podcasts that week that all come out at the same time. Who wants to hear the same person tell the same story,
It's true. I will say the least watched or listened to podcasts that I do, I'm mostly just audio format. The least listened to podcasts I do are the celebrities.
Yeah.
And because also, by the way, the celebrities aren't that interesting. We already know their full story. And if you're a celebrity because you're like an actor, you might not have much personality of yourself. So there's lots of different kinds of celebrities, but they're not really the best podcast guests.
I mean, I think the other strength I have is that I have a story behind me. Like I have an interesting story that supports me.
Yeah.
Which I think will make my value go up as I get into the realm of, because I haven't done anyone's like huge platform for a podcast. Like I haven't done any of the mainstream podcasts. Yours is probably going to be the best podcast I've done since Mind Pump, in relation to numbers and reach wise. I got a lot of people that reach out to me to do podcasts, like people that are just starting. And I was doing those all at first, but I'm slowing down and stopping on those because it just gets oversaturated and they all say the same thing and they don't direct the conversation in the right way. And that's, no hate on them. They're new and they're starting, but I prefer not to go onto a podcast where they just say, so tell me everything, tell me the whole story. You gotta guide it and direct it. But I think that it's going to increase my value, my ability to tell stories and have an interesting story. Because I could be a great podcast host, but not have a story. What's the value in another podcaster bringing me on just to talk about the guests I've had on or whatever? I think that would get old after a while.
No, and I think you having the background you have makes you a better interviewer, of course, on your podcast. So, that sets you apart as well.
Definitely.
Well, Ian Bick, thank you so much for coming on my podcast, of course. And look, I watch the YouTube version of your podcast, and it's great. You're doing a great job. I wish you every luck and success, and thank you for putting up with my tell me everything approach to your story. So I really appreciate it, and thanks so much for coming on the show.
No, thank you, James. I appreciate it, man. You directed it very good. You asked different questions than the average person asks, so that's what I like. And I remember talking to Jay about that too. It was a fun conversation. I appreciate the time, man.
Thanks, Ian.
Your daily dose of gaming just got way more epic with the Snapdragon processor powering the Samsung Galaxy S23 Ultra. Snapdragon processors give you the premium mobile experience that triggers your inner champion. Whenever you want, wherever you want. Get ready for edge-of-your-seat performance, advanced customizations, ultra-realistic graphics, and adrenaline-boosting speeds that have the power to move you in more ways than one. Follow us on Instagram at Snapdragon Official.
The McNugget Buddies are back. But this time, they got a fresh look as part of the new Current Frost box at McDonald's. We're talking all new buddies, dressed head to toe in the freshest fits, all designed by the artist Current Frost. So when you order the Current Frost box with your choice of 10-piece McNuggets or a Big Mac, you'll get one of the flyest McNugget Buddies to go with it. Think you can collect them all? Ba-da-ba-ba-ba. I'm loving it.
At participating McDonald's for a limited time while supplies last.